Hello and welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes. We've got a full house. It's Patrick McGulp, James McKenzie and Chris McElwain, a.k.a. Double Denim. Gentlemen, it's the big one. Now, I was asking the guys yesterday, would you have rather we won it last night or tonight? And the headline would suggest, Patrick, we will write our own story, won't we?
Oh yeah, I think I'd much rather we win it on our own. You know, it would have been a bit funny last night if Dundee managed to salvage something, but no, I prefer to win it. You know, when Celtic are playing, it'd be nice to win it at home for a change. I feel as if, you know, famously during the 9 in a row years back in the 60s and 70s, we won all 9 away from home, and it feels as if we win it from home away. We win it away from home every year. So I'd like to win it at Celtic Park one year, but no, I like to see Celtic take the title over the line, and you'd like to think tonight's the night, because all we need to do is avoid defeat.
What is it, James, with most of the people on this show, most of the people in the comments who dare utter the mere suggestion that Celtic would win the league title? It's almost as if nobody wants to be overconfident, but all the hard graft has been done. Yes, we do need to get a point tonight, James, but there's nothing wrong with going into that game with a bit of confidence, surely.
I feel like a lot of Celtic supporters have a bit of hesitancy to get too overconfident now because they're about 7 titles of the way they're going for 10. And we're singing about winning that, and that came back to bite us in a major fashion. So I think ever since then, there is just a hesitancy to get too over the top and too overconfidence. But I think we can prepare to enjoy ourselves tonight, hopefully. It's a tough ground to go. It couldn't be a tougher ground in the league for Celtic to be going to try and secure a league title than Rugby Park. I think it's the only ground in Scotland we haven't won at this season. And Derek McKinney's 10 points for Celtic at Celtic Park as well. He knows what it takes to sort of get under Rodgers' skin a bit when it comes to these games and causes teams some problems. But there should be enough quality in that team to get things done. I think the last time we lost at Rugby Park, we had playing up front. I remember him missing a load of chances in that game. This is a team that they look like they know how to get the job done. We've been in a good bit of form. There's not as much disruption at this current point as there was the last time we faced Kilmarnock, and I think that will favour Celtic heavily going into this game.
Right, we're going to be talking about past endeavours against this team, this campaign. We're going to be talking about how special a night it is tonight in relation to the fact that it is the anniversary of the passing of the late, great Tommy Burns and also Bobby Murdoch. We'll be looking at the implications of Celtic winning this league title and what it's going to mean not just for Celtic but for our nearest challengers. And that will lead us, I guess, onto the Champions League and the new format and what you see as success being in there just to be in it, or what do you think we can do? And we'll move, I am sure, into a wee bit of the recruitment, a wee bit of the Ange Postecoglou meltdown. The grass isn't always greener, big fella. And also Neil Lennon appears to be getting back into the game. But I'm going to start with tonight. Obviously, it's a big one, Chris. By the way, can I just say that is a beautiful Acsom cross you've got around your neck there? That's a cracker.
Anniversary present from the from a good lady.
Nice one.
She's a keeper, and it's a good night to have it on it too. But yeah, no, there's a poignancy tonight, right? I mean, okay, look, we're all desperate to get the title over the line, and just remove some of that anxiety. And I agree with some of the sentiments. You know, you don't want to be overconfident. You know, I don't want to be the team that's running about doing laps of honours after a 3-3 win, shall we say? But I think tonight, and you mentioned two legends there, but one that was a particular hero of mine, Tommy Burns, who is not only rightly a legend at Celtic, he's also held in very, very high regard by the Kilmarnock fans as well, where he really kicked off, I think, in anger his real, managerial career that eventually led to Celtic. And interestingly enough, my daughter's actually at Rugby Park tonight because her partner is a Kilmarnock fan, but she's in there. She's infiltrated the Kilmarnock fans, but she's going to be hopefully secretly celebrating with the rest of us tonight if the result goes our way. But yeah, huge night. Really, I'm certainly confident that we'll get over the line. I think, as James has said, it's been a bit of a bogey team for us, but I feel as though this is the pieces are just in place. The chess pieces are just lined up, and everything seems to be falling into place at exactly the right time. So I hope the boys do it tonight for all the supporters, for all of us, all the guys on the chat, and for the memory of Tommy and Bobby.
This is the thing. We are a sentimental club, Patrick. Nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's one of the things I love about Celtic is how sentimental we can be in relation to the figures that have gone before, the honours, the traditions, the past, the heritage, everything. I just love it. I mean, I'm now Timmy Mallett's biggest fan because he tapped into that. He tapped into that during the week. That's what it's all about. Now, we'll start off by talking about Kilmarnock, the challenge that they've given us this season, and James was quite right in what he said. I'm going to go back to the first game. It was a cup game. Even when you're flying, you can lose a cup game, which I think is why the quadruple treble was such an incredible achievement. On the 20th of August, near the beginning of the season, we obviously went to Rugby Park. They beat us 1-0. And here's the Celtic team, guys. And this is the point I'm going to make throughout the games, the 4 games we played against them. The Celtic team read Hart, Ralston, Taylor, Nawrocki, Lagerbielk, O'Reilly, Kalmack, Odenholm, Abada, Kyogo, Maeda. Now, I am going to throw this out there. Disagree with me if you will. I'm going to throw out there that the team we started with against Rangers was or is the strongest team that we've got. Would anyone disagree with that at this moment in time? Forest on form. I think the starting 11 is the strongest team we have, right? People might say, Scales isn't as good as Lagerbielk. Really? Or Scales isn't as good as Nawrocki. I've not seen it, right? So on form, the team that we had at the weekend, that team that played Kilmarnock away, 1, 2, 3, 5. 5 guys started that game who wouldn't get in the strongest starting 11, okay? Now, I know that Abada's left, and arguably, on top form, Abada would be in the starting 11. But we're losing James a wee bit. If he comes back, that would be fine. We then take them to home, 7th of October 2023. We beat them 3-1. Hatate, Palmer and Taylor scoring the goals. Young Watson got the consolation for Kilmarnock. And this is the Celtic team that beat them 3-1 fairly comfortably, if you remember. Joe Hart, Johnston, Taylor, Carter Vickers and Scales, O'Reilly, Kalmack, Hatate, Maeda, Kyogo, Palmer. So in terms of the strongest lineup that we've seen against Rangers there at the weekend, the only change from that lineup was the fact that Palmer played. And to be fair, at that time, he was on good form. He scored a goal. You then go to the away game where they beat us 2-1. We took the lead through Matt O'Reilly, you'll remember. But Big Nat Phillips scored an OG. Where is he now? And Matty Kennedy scored for them as well. And the Celtic team on that day was as follows. It was Hart, Johnston, Taylor, Phillips, Scales, O'Reilly, Awata, McGregor, Johnston, O and Palmer. So again, 5 players that weren't in the starting 11 at the weekend. And then they won each game. And I know we finished this game in February 2024 with Bernaby at left back. We drew 1 each. They scored a 94th minute equaliser. Kyogo scored our goal. And the starting 11 was Hart, Ralston, Taylor, Welsh and Scales. Maeda, Palmer, Kyogo, O'Reilly, Kalmack with Ida up top. 4 guys that weren't in the starting 11. Patrick, now I'm not making excuses. I'll leave that to other people about injuries. But when you look at each individual game, we weren't at our strongest. The first game, I think we were in a settling in period. There was a lot of new bodies coming in. Rodgers was trying to find out who he could trust and who he liked as players, who would fit his system. Tonight is a completely different game. Now, I know that they're running with the narrative that it's tough because we found it tough. They beat us twice. It'll be part of the season. I'm going to put it out there. The fact that we've got the strongest lineup and the fact that the league title is riding on us getting something from this game adds a completely different context to it tonight. Would you agree with that?
100%. And I think what adds, there is another slight dimension to that. And Kilmarnock obviously had a big result at the weekend. They secured Europe. They secured 4th place.
Yeah.
So, I'm not saying that their season's over and they've got their feet up and they're in holiday mode, but they've not got an awful lot to fight for tonight. They'll probably have celebrated at the weekend there. Obviously only a few days training, handful of training sessions. So we've got a lot more at stake than they do. I think it was a bit of retribution from McInnes, that those 3 results that you mentioned, because he had an abysmal record against Rodgers and against Celtic in the last 5-10 years, Rodgers' last spell. So there was a bit of payback on McInnes's part there. And as you say, those players, you could say Palmer at the time probably was in the strongest 11. Abada at the time, part of the strongest 11. Awata, maybe in February, you could argue was part of the strongest 11. But I think now, we've obviously been on this great run of form since, the end of February, pretty much. And, It was not. I don't think we've lost since Hearts at Tynecastle with those dodgy decisions. So, as you say, there's a lot more riding on it for us. It feels like we're going to get it over the line. This feels like the time where we're going to win the league tonight. You've obviously got the display with Tommy, and it just feels right. It feels like tonight's the night. And you look back to 2 years ago, well, I do anyway, and Dundee United, second last game of the season, Wednesday night, up at Tannadice. I thought we were going to win that night. We ended up getting a draw, but a draw tonight would also be enough. But no, I'm quite confident we'll get over the line tonight. Hopefully a 2 or 3-0 victory with Hugo back on form, Maeda back on form, Forrest back on form. I thought Hatate sort of faded at the weekend there. I'm sure we're going to talk about that, but as you say, it's definitely our strongest 11 at the moment, and we're finishing the season strong, which is really important, and I think it's what's got us over the line as well.
Yeah, I also think it's important to keep the level of performance up going into the last couple of games, Chris, because we do have the Scottish Cup final, and it's all about maintaining that standard of performance. I've got to admit, I listened in to the game last night. Obviously, I wanted to know Celtic were going to be crowned champions, so I was doing a bit of Acsom work at the kitchen table. I had the old tranny on, old school transistor radio, that is, by the way, on, and following the action, Chris. And I've got to say one thing, and I'll bring James back in for this. Somebody's trying to cut his connection.
I tried the old-fashioned unplug and plug it back in.
The reset procedure, yeah. Technical genius. I was going to say, James, listening into the game last night, they were cutting over to the Partick Thistle Raith Rovers game, and they were speaking to their live reporter, Amy Canavan. What a job that girl's doing, by the way. James, what an inspiration it must be for a young guy coming through your journey in journalism to see Amy Canavan. She's absolutely outstanding, isn't she? She really is.
Yeah, I've just finished my third year studying journalism. Amy did the same degree, the same course I did. So I've got one more year left uni. We'll see what comes after then. But I've done a bit of reporting for a Celtic State of Mind at some Celtic games already. We've done a B team derby, and we're in attendance for the Champions League game as well. So it's good that you can get these sort of opportunities as well. And you get a bit more of an insight into what the players are like as well. I will say Brendan Rodgers is incredible with the media. I've handled them a couple of times. Whenever I was speaking to Andy, it was a bit sort of nervy. But when it comes to Brendan, he's sort of really good with everyone. And we know that from watching the press conferences, that he can get a bit fiery, but he's really calculated. He's smart. He's never going to say anything rash or overthink anything when it comes to the media. He's always pretty nailed on with it. And you've seen, for the sort of feud he's had with the media throughout this season, I'm pretty sure we could call it that. I think he had the last laugh after the game on Saturday. I think we all saw his press conference. We had a big smile on our face when we were watching what he was saying.
The thing with that as well, heaven help anybody that goes in and asks Ange Postecoglou the wrong question these days. Thankfully, we won't be in the press conferences, but obviously Brendan was asked if he had fun at the weekend, and there was a moment where I wasn't sure if he was taking it in jest or if he was going to explode. There was just that moment of doubt, that 20-yard stare. We've mentioned Tommy Burns, right? And I want to run with this because during that press conference, perfect segue into it there, James. During that press conference, I was waiting for somebody to ask about Tommy because all I was hearing was questions about how well Derek McInnes has done. And they're asking Brendan Rodgers. Now, Brendan's a very respectful manager when it comes to that kind of thing, Patrick. He knows what to do. He knows how to play the room. He knows the kind of answers. And I think it is genuine. He's very respectful to his fellow pros. But I'm sitting thinking to myself, right, okay, so it's Wednesday. No one in that room figured out that is the anniversary of Tommy. And the pivotal nature of that is the fact that he was involved in the development of some of the guys that are going to be playing for Celtic. Because when he was pivotal and instrumental in Lennoxtown, for example, and working with the youth academy, we had guys like James Forrest and Callum McGregor coming through. Now, Tommy Burns has made a huge impact on anybody that he's ever dealt with in the world of football, crossing the divide, you could say as well. So you've got players on the park that Tommy influenced and inspired. You've got John Kennedy in the dugout, as well as Brendan Rodgers, who spoke about, the influence of Tommy when he was down at Reading, wasn't it? And then you've got both sets of fans at Rugby Park, because as Chris said before, what he did at Kilmarnock was incredible. The job he did got him the Celtic job. He was brilliant. And I think he's maybe admitted later on the Celtic job came too early for him in his managerial career, but he was never going to say no. Now, Kilmarnock are going to have a minute's applause. The Green Brigade have put out a graphic which would suggest their tifo might be a tribute to Tommy as well. But it does surprise me at times that, these obvious questions are not asked. There was a couple of questions actually by a very experienced journalist, and I was shaking my head because there weren't even questions. He just made a couple of statements. Actually spoke over Brendan Rodgers at one point, Paddy. I would much rather ask him about Tommy and get a wee insight into the time he spent with the great man.
Yeah, it would have been nice. Obviously the one or two fan media that were there, you're sort of coming off the back of a victory over Rangers, and the league's almost in the bag. So you obviously want to ask questions about that, and you've only got limited time and limited questions. But the fact that there was a room full of people and not a single one asked about Tommy, it is a bit disappointing. Obviously, Kilmarnock will remember him, and the Celtic fans will remember him with the display that's going to be happening tonight. And I'm sure Brendan must be asked about it by Sky tonight when it's on the telly. Someone's due to ask him because he did mention that when he first came in, when the 13,000 fans were in the main stand, and he quoted him, and I think it was Redden that he worked with him, and sort of gave him a few tips about Celtic and about football and management and stuff. And I don't know how close they were. They obviously worked together for some length of time, but it's obviously a very special day, both in terms of remembering Tommy and hopefully winning the league for Celtic. And it'd be quite nice for someone to get Brendan's thoughts on it, because I'm not sure, beyond those first opening words when he first became the manager, if he spoke much about Tommy Burns. Not that I can recall, anyway. I can't remember any other sort of stories or quotes. So it'd be nice to hear, I'm not sure how much time they spent together, as I said, but it'd be nice to hear Brendan's view on things. And he did come across quite reserved, I thought, in that press conference. He's not quite ready to celebrate the league title, so it'll be interesting to see what he's like post match tonight. Because I'm sure, up at Tannadice 2 years ago, you had this sort of plastic display, and you've got guys in the park in front of the fans, and you'll have all these different interviews. So I'm sure the players and the management team will be asked about Tommy and winning the league and what it means. Because, it is very special. We've not won, we've only won 3 titles in a row so many times. I think it's only 3 or 4 times we've done it in our whole history. Maybe 5, actually. But, it's a very special achievement on a very special day. And, it's nice that it has come against Kilmarnock. That's quite a nice sort of coincidence, if you want to call it that. So hopefully it can be a special night.
That's an interesting one, off the top of my head, Patrick, the 3 in a row thing. So we had an early 6 in a row team. We've obviously had 2 9 in a rows, and we had 3 in a row under Gordon Strachan. That's very interesting, actually. How many times? Get the statos in the comments field. How many times have we won 3 in a row? Yeah, that's a very, very good one indeed. I've never thought about that. But yeah, I would like to hear Brendan Rodgers. I found it a very interesting press conference, Patrick. And I'm not having a dig at the fan media, by the way. I think they do a great job in these press conferences. And often they ask the questions that are not formulaic. And I also get why journalists are asking certain things, because they're told to. You know what I mean? That whoever's ahead of them in the game, tell them to go in and get this or get that. And they go through the generic questions of injuries and all that. I get it, totally get it. And how do you motivate your players and all this kind of stuff? But the fan media, I think, are a wee bit braver in that respect. And I thought that during Angie's time, he was very kind to the fan media guys as well. So, yes, Tommy Burns, as I've said many, many times on this show and elsewhere, the very first game I ever went to at Celtic Park was the Tommy Burns testimonial against Liverpool. My very first season ticket, Tommy Burns was the manager. So he's kind of been omnipresent in my Celtic supporting life up until his sad passing 16 years ago. It's hard to, it's really hard to accept that it's been that long. Now, when you think about him, I also think about the centenary year. That's just me. There might have been great moments before it, but that season, Chris, was special in so many ways. And there's like probably a sun kind of drenched nostalgia about it. I know that not every game is played in the sun, but when I think about the centenary season, I do think about the cup final and the 2-each game when McAvenny gets sent off. That was a sunny day as well. Peter Grant still claims that goal that Terry Butcher scored, by the way, at his own net. But a hero of mine, an absolute hero. And it ties in nicely that we're going to be with some of his centenary teammates this Friday, Chris.
Yeah, I'm gutted I'm not going to be there, unfortunately for unavoidable reasons. I was desperate to get there, and I was really looking forward to meeting some of the guys like Ewan Boy and Paddy Lavery, etc., and anyone that's going. But absolutely no doubt it'll be a fantastic night, and it would be lovely to have it after having clinched the title. I mean, that would be tremendous. But yeah, Paul John, I'm very much like you. The centenary year, it was my favourite strip, my favourite Celtic strip. It was the first one that I ever owned. First one I was ever able to convince my dad to buy me. And it just, that, I think for me, was when my proper love for Celtic as a supporter, as someone who's, 8 or 9 years old at that time, and starting to become, more of a real proper supporter as opposed to just the young kids. That was the big season for me. And I've been looking back at some of it today, and there's the famous 1988 Cup final interview with Tommy Burns where he's unbelievably emotional, and he does the full Rocky Balboa thing where the first thing he says, I just want to thank my wife who I love and my kids, and he talks about
he's so emotional, isn't he?
Hospital, and it just summed up the man and how he felt about being a Celtic player and having success, and it was so focused on the fans as well. I mean, I think if you were to ever just take a die-hard Celtic fan and give him the opportunity to play, you'd come up with Tommy Burns, right? He just lived for it. And I was fortunate enough to meet the man on 2 occasions, very, very briefly, because I was only a young teenager when he was a manager. And it was a little cafe in Mount Florida, which is no longer there, I believe. It was called the Cafe Amalfi, run by a lovely group of young ladies. And Tommy apparently was a very regular visitor in there. And I remember I used to go in and meet my mother after I was going to the college at the time, and my mum worked in a factors there, and we'd nip in at the cafe for a bit of lunch, and you turn around and look over, and there's Tommy Burns sitting there, casual as you like, in the cafe, cup of tea, and I think he was sitting, I think it may have been Jim Traynor, might have been a journalist at the time he was giving an interview to, so obviously Tommy's dragged him across to this cafe that he was known for going to. I remember my mother saying, go and talk to him, giant of a man, I'm a wee guy at the best of times, but then it was even smaller. Tommy Burns, giant of a man, and the ginger hair and the glasses and looking sharp as anything. And eventually he was walking past, he was obviously concluding he was walking past, and they had the game that night, and I think I turned and I said, excuse me, Tommy, Mr. Burns, can't remember what I said. So I said, but good luck tonight, Tommy. And he just put his hand on my shoulder. I said, thanks very much, pal. Squeezed my shoulder and off he went. That was it. That was, it didn't get
presence of greatness, Chris.
Than that for me. And I saw him once again with similar circumstances. He actually remembered me, and again, patting me on the shoulder, how are you doing, that kind of thing. So, but I remember, the 95-96 season where, we went, I think one game we lost. And it's interesting because I know it wasn't what you'd consider a successful season, particularly in relation to what we've seen in more recent years. But for me, given what had come in the years prior to that at the club, from the centenary season up to that point, and all the hardship we'd had and the uncertainty around the club, that season for me reignited a bit of belief that actually, do you know what? We can become successful again. We can get back. And the only regret is that Tommy wasn't the man to take us there. But I think he laid the foundations. I think bringing in guys like Van Hooijdonk, Cadete, John Collins, showing the stuff, showing what it means to players like Peter Grant and, Paul McStay as the captain. I mean, you look back at some of those players, Roy Aitken, fabulous. And that for me laid the groundwork for what came after when we eventually stopped the 10-0 under Wim Jansen, and players like Henrik Larsson and Lobo Moravcik and Johan Mjällby coming in. And I think that all started with the work that Tommy and Billy Stark and those guys did. So tonight, for me, it's about every one of the supporters, but as Tommy would say, they're carrying the hopes and dreams of the supporters. I want us to go and win it tonight. Really, I can't emphasise enough how much of a hero Tommy Burns was to me.
Thing is, Chris, I'm thinking about the fact you met him. I wish I did. One of my greatest regrets, never ever met the great man. But what you said there, I find really, really, really interesting, because I don't think Tommy gets the credit for something you said, right? So that season you're talking about, the one defeat was 2-0 against Rangers. It was Alec Cleland and maybe Paul Gascoigne that scored for them. And that was the only defeat of the season. Patrick, I'm guessing you were in nappies at this point, if you were even born, mate. Sorry. I hope this isn't.
I wasn't about back then. I was -4, I think, that year.
Oh my word, -4. Wow. I know. So the point that you made there about the style of play, right? We've at that point not seen a team playing with that free flowing, I would say, traditional Celtic element probably since the centenary season, because after that it all went a bit awry. We weren't great, and obviously we went through the Liam Brady spell of buying a lot of players who just didn't fit with our football club, and the style wasn't there until Tommy came back. But the other point you raised, I think, is a tremendous point. I'm not even sure I've thought about it as deeply as this before. But he tore up the rule book when it came to recruitment, because up to that point, Celtic had very, very few overseas players playing for the club. Very few, really, when you think about it in the history of the club. Now, I know you could go right back and say, okay, we had a few Brazilian trialists back in the 60s, and we had a goalkeeper called Bent Martin. The only reason we were aware of him is because we played his side in Europe that season or the season before. We weren't scouting Europe. This is my point. We then signed Shuggy Edvaldsson because we had played his side either in Europe or in a friendly. So we became aware of Shuggy Edvaldsson. Rudi Vata, the only reason we became aware of him was because he played the Republic of Ireland and Liam Brady seen him playing. So we weren't going out scouting players from within any further afield than probably the British Isles and Ireland, right? So our team was, largely made up of that contingent. And you're right, we then went out and got Van Hooijdonk, Andreas Thom, Paulo Di Canio, George Cadet, and it went on and on and on. And I think what is an interesting factor in that is that did lay the foundations of what we do now, Chris. I think it's a great point. I don't know if Tommy gets the credit for that. I know he had a scouting team. Davy Hay was part of the scouting team. Andy Ritchie was part of the scouting team. But yes, let's remember Tommy tonight, 100%. And I don't mind going on and on and on about Tommy Burns. I'll share one last thing. We've done an interview, a couple of interviews actually, with his two daughters and also with one of his sons, because I believe his other son lives over in the States. And check them out on the channel, actually. They're on the YouTube. And what I found really interesting is everybody goes on about the fact Tommy was always late to everything. He was always late. But they were explaining to me, his kids were explaining to me, that it's because he would never pass anybody that came to speak to him. So obviously, Tommy walking down a street, how often is he going to get stopped? And he's on his way somewhere, and he turns up late, and people think his timekeeping is bad. But the fact is, he's spending time with Celtic supporters. That's what he's doing. He wouldn't walk past them. Let's talk about implications, Patrick. Let's talk about implications, right? Celtic, if they do win 3 in a row this evening, and hopefully somebody in the comments has told us how often we've done that, let's have a wee look. How many times have we done that? AR, yeah, I agree with you. Liam Brady, great player, terrible manager. 100%. We were rudderless at that stage, unfortunately. Spent a fair bit of money as well, but we didn't have any success, unfortunately. Let us know how many times Celtic have won 3 or more in a row. Well, the implications is now that I was looking over the last 24 years, more your era, Patrick. I wanted you to feel part of this conversation. In the last 24 years, mate, we have won 18 league titles if we win tonight. That's always a caveat. 38 trophies in 24 years, right? We won still to play for in the Scottish Cup. We've won 6 trebles, 6 doubles. It's going to be 7 if we beat Rangers, having clinched the title, which I hope we do tonight. Always caveat in this. We're not being arrogant. We have reached the Champions League groups 9 times. We have reached a UEFA Cup final. We know when that was. We also reached the quarter-final of the UEFA Cup the following season. And we have got into the last 16 of the Champions League on 3 occasions, all in 24 years. So domestic dominance, I've been saying here that, you win the 3 and the implications financially could spell another period of dominance, but we're already in a period of dominance, and I've got to say that. But what will happen is the financial wealth, obviously, will allow us to invest in training facilities, which are underway, the stadium perhaps, and of course the personnel on the park. And all with a view to what we can do in Europe. I really want to speak about this because obviously the new format, it's a new era. I loved how in the introduction of the new era, Patrick, they said it was based on sporting merit. Really? Or just the league that you're in? You know what I mean? Sporting merit, the Champions League. And so many of the clubs are not champions of the leagues. Anyway, 36-team league phase. So it's being extended to 36 teams. It's going to be a league. We're going to be playing 8 games, 4 at home, 4 away. And then the first 8 in the league will go directly into the last 16. There's then a playoff between the teams from 9th position to 24th. They go into a 9th game, a playoff to get into the last 16. And anybody below 24th drops out of Europe entirely. They've had their 8 games, they've made their money, and they go into the night. Now, that is what we're aiming towards. The big question is, Patrick, really, in terms of the ceiling of Scottish football, where we are in the food chain, what is European progress? Are we there just to play the 8 games, get all the bounty, put loads of money in the bank, buy a few players, or are we actually there to try and progress? And if we are, what does progress look like?
I think it looks like finishing in that 9th to 24th place, if I'm being honest, and getting the extra, two-legged playoff that you mentioned. In that playoff, you'd imagine first to 8, that's going to be teams like Man City, Liverpool, Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, creme de la creme of European football. That 9th to 24th, it could be a bit of a spread. And I don't know if that's another draw or 9th plays 24, 10th plays 23. I'm not sure how that works. But you're obviously playing against a team in a two-legged playoff. And you'd assume it's teams like maybe Juventus, Dortmund, Club Brugge, maybe Aston Villa this coming year. Sort of teams who are probably, slightly above Celtic in the European food chain. So, we would be underdogs, but it's a winnable game. Probably unlikely, but it's a winnable game. I think that should be the aim, to get into that 9th to 24th spot, have 10 Champions League games, and then obviously there's no drop down anymore. And then I believe after this year, the SPFL champion will have to play a playoff to get into the group phase. And you're in a different territory there, because if you then drop into the Europa League, I think the aim absolutely has to be that playoff, if not the 1 to 8 place in the Europa League. And then once you're in the Europa League knockout stages, I know we've got this. We've had this hurdle in front of us the last 20 odd years. We can't seem to win a knockout game, but should we ever, fail to win the league or fail to win a playoff qualifier, and we do drop into the Europa League, I think, our aim should be getting to quarters, semis, finals. I think that's where we are financially. If you look at the turnover of teams who get to these stages, I'm not sure of Atalanta's finances, but I can't imagine it's much more than the 120 million that Celtic are bringing in. So I think this coming year, it has to be finishing in the 9th to 24th places. And if we're in the Champions League, I think that has to be our aim, and just seeing where we go from there, top 24. We've obviously got, I think it's 50 odd million we're getting for competing in the Champions League. O'Reilly is almost certainly going to go out the door for a club record fee. We've recently brought in 10 million for Abada. You've obviously got all the season ticket money, the commercial money. We've got the chance to really build a belt of a squad to compete next season. And I think we do need the 4 or 5 players to come in to compete both in the Champions League and to make certain of winning the league next season. So we've got a really big summer. And, as I said, you've got that playoff. Whoever wins the league next year is going into that playoff. So you've actually got a Champions League playoff in, say, August 2025. You probably need to bring the players in now, because you know what we're like, scrambling about at the end of a window. So you're actually preparing for that playoff in 16 months' time in this window. So we've got a really, really big opportunity this summer. And as I say, for the coming Champions League campaign, should we get 1 point from the remaining 2 games this season, the goal should be in that 9th to 24th place for me.
I agree with you, Patrick. I really do. And remember, we've got 6.8 million quid probably coming in from Jeremy Frimpong's Stellon as well. Jeremy is doing okay since he was obviously at Celtic as a 300 grand Man City development player. Unbelievable bit of business by the club, I've got to say. But some great points raised by yourself there, Patrick. And I think it does come down to vision, down to ambition. I always go back to the comments that were made by the then chairman, Ian Bankier, when he was talking about the fact we just can't compete. I just cannot think. I can't wire my brain up to think like that, Chris. If you think like that, day to day you'll achieve nothing, never mind in business. But, you know, that was the one that really frustrated me. That was the one comment that made me think that certainly the way that I think as a Celtic fan, and the way that the board were operating were completely two sides of the spectrum. And you would hope, I know they can't come out and say, we want to compete in Europe, because at this moment in time, we don't even know what that looks like. I agree with Patrick. I think it's trying to get that middle table spot. And if you can get in there, you enjoy it. By the way, good point. You enjoy another couple of games, taking up to 10 games in Europe, and you're opening the floodgates to more finances that hopefully you can build on.
Yeah, I think I really think Patrick made some absolutely brilliant points there, and I wholeheartedly agree. There's a word I'm going to use, and I know I'll get pelters for using it in the chat, because it's one that we get banded about an awful lot. But I think sustainability has to be the short-term objective. We have to get into Europe. We have to start competing, but at the level that Paddy specified. But we have to get re-established in Europe as a European entity, as a club. And I think, you know, the investment that should come as part of this revenue generation that we're hopefully getting from this season and going forward has to go to the infrastructure, has to go to recruitment, has to go to youth development, has to go to all these areas that allow us to have sustainable establishment in Europe's top table. And I think, you know, when you talk about the meaningful progress on the pitch, I think Patrick's right. You know, it's about competing at that level in the Champions League. And if we do drop into the second tier competition, Europa League, we have to start making meaningful progress on the pitch in that competition and actually going to the latter stages. So we have to be realistic. I think the food chain, European food chain, is a great way of explaining it. We've got to be realistic about our current place in the European food chain. But that, for me, is where we want to measure progress. Domestic domination is fantastic. Love having it. Love lording it over Rangers. You know, I'm enjoying the title race despite all the stress this season. But ultimately, I want to win. You know, every time, and I want to have that sustained domestic success. But really measurable progress as a club and as a European institution has to come at that competition. We're not going to go in there and have another Lisbon probably in the next 10, 20, 30 years. But why can't we aim high? Why can't we aim to continue trying to progress as a club in European competition? Turn Paradise into that fortress again in Europe. Have more nights like we had against Barcelona and AC Milan and Spartak Moscow and all these different teams that we played, and we had those amazing nights with the characters like the Holy Goalie and you know, Scott McDonald goals and Henrik scoring 2 against Porto. You know, I want more Sevilles. I want more games like that. Not just as a supporter, but as someone who really wants the club to just move up levels. It doesn't have to be huge jumps, but just incremental levels up. Let's see progress year on year, and let's invest wisely to make sure we're doing that. But the frustration is that we sometimes seem to go into a reset mode. We won the league. All right, reset. Short air. Best players, let's bring in some projects, see if we can rinse and repeat. No, build on success. Augment the strength that we've got. I know we'll realistically will not keep a player like O'Reilly. He's going to go right to the top, that boy, and rightly so, and wish him nothing but success in doing so. But let's try and build on some of the success that we gain at the end of each season, and let's try and make that meaningful progress. That's what I want to see. So yeah, I think Patrick summed it up absolutely perfectly. Really, really great points. Really well made.
You spoke there about lording it up over the opposition. If anyone follows John Hughes on the social media channels, you'll see that the big fella is not with us today, but he's still lording it up on a beach somewhere in Europe.
Man.
He is some man. So really, it's about whether or not we capitalise on it. You're spot on, and I know, and I understand why a lot of people are not confident that the board have that vision or the ambition to do it. I'm really keen to hear your thoughts in the comment section. Kaiser, good to hear from you, fella. What a team. Tell me about football the Celtic way, and a modern guy's not seen the like since. He was sensational. I've got my theory, obviously, on the fact that when he took over, we had a young goalie in there called Shay Given, and Pat Bonner come back to the club, and you know, he was basically saying to Tommy, we've got to sign this boy up, by which time, unfortunately, Blackburn had already made their offer and we could not compete with it. Otherwise, I think that a couple of seasons down the line, Tommy would have had that level of goalie playing for his team, and it was really just a goalkeeper that we lacked. It really was. Kevin Malley, give it a year jibe by Sutton. Yeah, I know. And by the way, we spoke about this, Acsom, didn't we? And we were talking about the fact that really, I mean, we're talking about if you're a pundit on Sky Sports, you've attained a level in your chosen field that is up there. I mean, you are on Sky Sports, you're a pundit, right? And if the best you can come away with is what Chris Boyd said to Chris Sutton last night, you know, we've got the most, but it's like, come on, man. You know, as I say, just a wee reminder to Chris, if you're tuning in, that's Chris with a K. 18 leagues in 24 years, mate. 38 trophies in 24 years, with one still to play for. 6 trebles, 6 trebles, 6 doubles. By the way, that included a quadruple treble and a 9 in a row. Possibly 7 doubles. It speaks for itself. Domestic domination. And Big Chris, he just took a moment and then he responded in such a way that Chris Boyd had to shut up because he'd already been told by Ellie Barber to. Uncle Nobby's Steamboat. Tommy Burns used to give the players Celtic videos home to watch. Brilliant, eh? And again, another wee story. I said I would not share anything else, but Tommy's kids were talking about the fact we'd signed George Cadet. He'd come over, I think initially on his own. He was lonely, he was isolated, and they were all sitting for their Christmas dinner. There's a chap on the door, and Tommy hadn't announced to anybody, but George Cadet was coming in for Christmas dinner with the Burnsies, and there was Big George. And they came in with the gifts for the kids and all the rest of it. They found a seat at the table, and George Cadet had Christmas dinner with them. Bobby Murdoch, I want to mention Bobby as well, because, you know, growing up, you just think about the Lions and you think, oh, well, the greatest players, Jimmy Johnston, obviously, it's Jinky. I mean, even my boy talks about Jinky, right? Because of the skills and the entertainment and all that, Patrick, and probably the red hair. But when I started doing some research for my first book, and I spoke to people who were part of that team, and the part of the team that came up after the Lions, the Quality Street kids, they were all like, no, Bobby Murdoch was the man. Bobby Murdoch was sensational. He passed away aged just 56 on this day, 23 years ago now. He also won the league at Rugby Park. The point was made that we didn't win many of the first 9 at Celtic Park. It was 4 in a row on that occasion. It was the 21st April 1969. Now, you might not have known this. Here's a wee bit of, a wee fun fact for you. His wee brother was called Billy Murdoch. He also played for Celtic and was actually, part of that Quality Street gang team and he did come through. But he played with Kilmarnock, believe it or not. So there's another wee link. Bristol City and Stenhousemuir. Played 2 spells at Steny. And if we're talking about the Champions League, Paddy, we've always got to do that with one eye on what the Lisbon Lions achieved, their legacy. We talk about the club should do better, the fans deserve better. I think the legacy of the Lions deserve better as well.
Yeah. We obviously talk about them often, and it's obviously the club's greatest achievement. But I suppose you do end up talking about them as a group, and you talk about that sort of one night, one trophy. But obviously they achieved a hell of a lot together, and individually all fantastic players, really. And they probably don't get enough individual praise, really. I mean, you do talk about, obviously, you say Jinky, recognised as the club's greatest player. I think of Big Billy, the captain, Bobby Lennox and Stevie Chalmers, obviously, 2 of the club's all-time top goal scorers. Bertie, obviously, great stories. And, it'd be nice to talk about, all 11 individually, but they do sort of get lumped together for that one night in Lisbon, which was obviously magnificent. And I'm sure they would never complain about that. But it's nice to appreciate them on an individual level as well. And I never knew that about his brother Billy. I didn't even realise he had a brother who played football. So that's the things you learn when talking about Kilmarnock away.
I know.
But no, I mean, anyone who was lucky enough to watch that team in the late 60s, the vast a majority, I would say, probably do mention Murdoch. And I think my granda actually also mentioned how Murdoch was one of the, I've seen a comment today as well saying he was the engine of that team and one of the best passers of the ball that he's ever seen at Celtic. So probably a very underrated player. I know a lot of the people from that time will say he was one of the best, but probably quite underrated in in the modern memory of Celtic fans. Just to go back to Chris Boyd, not that I like talking about Chris Boyd, but you did mention him there. Another stat that snuck up in me was the head-to-head record. I mean, if you believe the sort of same club myth, we've actually only one win away from levelling the head-to-head record, which and you've obviously got league titles, which we have an opportunity to level next year. You've got the trophies, opportunity to level next year. So it is a bit of a turning point. So in 2 years' time, I think Chris Boyd will be unable to make the same point that he made on Sky last night.
Yes, and the thing with that, Patrick, right? Because listen, I don't think that kind of chat's been generated by Celtic fans, right? I think the number has been attached to the accumulation of two clubs' trophies, Chris, for one reason and one reason only. It's a constant reminder to themselves and to try and convince the rest of the world we are the same club. That's what it is. And I think there's an element of just humour in them because, as Patrick says, we're going to equal it anyway. If you combine them, we'll still equal it. And the fact their club was kicking around quite a bit. It was established quite a bit before ours. There's a few their trophies that are questionable, shared and all that kind of stuff. And also, if you're cashing your chips and you get more for a European Cup than you do for a League Cup, do you know?
I would have thought so. I mean, you could permeate it any different way, you know. If my granny had wheels, should be a wagon, you know. I mean, it's like, you know, how many different ways do you want to try and lord it over somebody? It doesn't matter, you know, whether you're, you know, you've won X amount of war. My dad's bigger than your dad, you know. I just enjoy every single victory, every single stat, every single record that we break, even if they invent a few more, you know, I'm looking forward to breaking them as well. You know, it's part of football rivalry, and you know what? It's a bit of banter. You know, there's plenty of decent supporters over on that side. You know, I've got family connections from there. But do you know what? You've got to take it. Paul John, you know, me and you had to go through 9 years of utter pain and, you know, jibes and everything that came through that 9 in a row year with them. So, you know what? It swings and roundabouts. It's our turn now, and I'm going to enjoy it. I'm certainly not going to apologise for it. And I think, you know, Chris Boyd going up against Chris Sutton, from an intellectual and sheer wit standpoint, is like Pee Wee Herman going up against Mike Tyson. You know, it's just that was only going to end one way, and yeah, it was brilliant to see. It was brilliant to see.
The levels. Yeah, absolutely. By the way, you were talking about, you know, fans of Rangers and all the rest of it, and being brought up where I came from. You were in an environment in the communities and in the schemes that I was brought up in, where it was not exclusively Celtic fans. I mean, I would actually suggest it was split right down the middle. And then there's some wee villages run about here. I'm thinking Cowdenbeath, which is definitely more of a Rangers stronghold, I would suggest, although big shout out to the Cowdenbeath Celtic supporters clubs up there as well. But yeah, it's one of the ones where a lot of it is patter and banter, but if you're going to go toe-to-toe, don't do it with Chris Sutton. I certainly would not. I asked him a question that night at Don Max. He goes, "That's a very generic question, Paul." I was like, "Thank you." Talking of upright, he did in front of 300 people, and they all laughed at me. Cheers, mate. Julia, The Stairs. I'm not sure about The Stairs. There's a great band from Liverpool called The Stairs, late 80s, early 90s. But there is obviously in your avatar a picture of some stairs. Giza mentioned, right, there's your mention, Julia, but I don't know who you are. But that wee bit at the end gives something away. Yob. What does that mean to you, Chris? Yob.
I'm a little bit scared to interpret that one, if I'm honest. I'm not sure.
I'll tell you what it means. Interesting enough, I just mentioned coming up through schemes and all the rest of it. As you might know, I'm from Fife, the West Fife villages. One of them is called Oakley. And if you ran around as part of a gang from Oakley, you were called a young Oakley boy, Yob.
Oh, actually, right? Gotcha. Thank you just for that. That was a lot better than what I had in my mind.
There you go. So, young Oakley boy. I was never a fully fledged ticket holder for the Yob, but yes, I'm well aware of them, and I hope they are fighting fit. John Mullaney, Tommy will be turning in his grave due to the financial state of his beloved chapel, St. Mary's. More to come on that, John, because obviously we ran a really successful charity campaign a couple of years ago. We managed to raise about 30 grand for St. Mary's. They were really in dire straits following the pandemic and, you know, going for a year without anybody actually going in for mass and all that stuff. So it's great that they are still there, but they are at the moment in financial peril. And due to a number of different factors, it's something that we will be speaking to them about with a view to planning some events, some probably quirky events, something a wee bit different. We've done a brilliant charity football game last year, for example, that Brendan Rodgers turned up at. I don't know if Jerry's mentioned that from time to time. So we can do things like that. We could maybe do a charity music event. There's a lot of stuff we could do to raise some funds for them. Before we go back into the comments, Patrick, there was a wee bit of news this morning, and I had to double check it because it was our mutual friend Declan McConville that shared it with us, around the replacement of Scottish football's head of referees. And I had to go in a couple of times to make sure it was legit, as the kids say. Willie Collum's been bestowed with such an honour. What's your feelings around that?
It's I mean, he was the top referee, wasn't he, for a long time? In the last 10, 12 years. I don't know who the official top referee in Scotland is now, but obviously that's the position that God, his name escapes me. Crawford Allen. Yep, that's the one he vacated. So does this mean that Willie is no longer an active referee?
Yeah.
So he's hanging up his boots?
He's hanging up his whistle. Yep.
Interesting. That's well, I mean, that'll be that. Obviously, I can imagine the reaction from some corners of Scottish football to that news. I mean, he's prone to a mistake, and I think he's quite full of himself. But you know, you hear stories about Willie Coleman. I think he's the referee's referee, isn't he? So I think it's probably a good pick, or as best a pick as he can probably make out of the bunch of referees that we have in this country. So. Yeah, I mean, you're not really ever going to be happy with any sort of selection for that role, but I mean, there are definitely worse picks for that job. So, I mean, it's interesting that he's sort of hanging up the boots, but yeah, I mean, it should be interesting to see what his tenure holds. I mean, we've obviously had umpteen inconsistencies and pattern of assistance for one club in particular, and issues with VAR, and how we've got a sort of a cheapskate VAR that makes all these mistakes. But it'll be interesting to see how that goes forward next season, because I think VAR's here to stay, unfortunately. So it'll be interesting to see how he manages these difficult situations in the future.
There's two ways to look at this, I think, right? The first one, Chris, when I saw it, was get it right up them, because that's just football. That's just the mentality of a football fan. Because they'll love it. They will love it. I mean, even the way he was communicating with their players wasn't good enough at the weekend. But the flip side of that is that I do believe, and it's a bit like the staleness of the SFA. It's one of my frustrations with the staleness of a boardroom who have got guys that are in there with 30 years service, etc. It's difficult to list what they've brought to the table in terms of vision and entrepreneurial flair or anything, anything at all, diversity of ideas. And I just think that, it shouldn't really be a given that it goes to somebody who's already in there, because that is part of the problem. You're almost feeding the problem that already exists. I would have liked to have seen a forward-thinking move to bring somebody in from the outside who was the best at the job.
Yeah, and you want to do what you can to remove those as much as possible in this country, to remove some of those questions of bias. I mean, I think when it was announced, I'm in Glasgow, and I'm sure from over in that direction, over the water there, I just heard a collective scream when it was announced. So to Patrick's point, I know maybe nobody's massively happy, but there's certainly a certain demographic that are less happy than others, shall we say, with the appointment. But I think you're right. It would be nice to maybe see someone come in externally, maybe from another association, another country even, who comes in with a completely blank slate in terms of the ideas they can bring. Not influenced by what's come before or what's already established in this country. I would maybe like something a bit more radical. But look, it's refereeing must be the worst job in the world in most countries. And I think this country it must be. It must be dreadful, and I won't make any accusations of bias one way or another, because there's no way you ever it ends well. But the point is that the standard of refereeing, as has been evidenced on many occasions, not just in this season, isn't good enough. The scrutiny on referees is extreme. The accusations of bias come from all channels, and whether legitimate or otherwise. And I just think, having a more objective, free from that pressure kind of structure in place that can then implement ideas, look at different suggestions, look at different strategies and tactics, to make refereeing a little bit more, if I can use the term, a little bit more protected from all these accusations and from all the optically all the stuff that comes from every set of supporters. The fact is that referees are human. They'll make mistakes. We can accept that. But sometimes you look at it and you think, how does that happen? Or how is that allowed to happen? Or what's the decision-making process about putting a referee in like that? A clear example is Beaton, right? And I'll leave it to the guys in the comments, and I've got my own opinion on Beaton's a referee, privately. But with all the controversy around the decision-making that he's had and the accusations of bias, for the governing body to put him right into the next major game for us, who made that decision and who thought that was a smart decision optically? And I think if you bring someone in with a experience, if you bring Pierluigi Collina, if you remember him, the famous bald Italian referee, if you were to bring him in, he would never have allowed that. He'd have said no. For the sake of not only protecting the individual, which I think is important, because I think referees absolutely should not be targeted, nor should families, for any reason. I want to make that really clear. But just in terms of having some legitimacy and having some integrity around your organisation, that was an insane decision. An absolutely insane decision.
Where's the credibility?
The credibility, there's the word. Yeah, that was the word I was looking for, the credibility. So, yes, look, good luck to Willie Collum. I hopefully will see some positive change, but let's face it, going into that role is not going to deflect from all the accusations he's had from a certain side of Glasgow, and whatever you think of him, he's unfortunately been part of this problem of having really a poor standard of refereeing in recent years in this country. So
he has been part of it. Yeah, you're right.
Yes, he has been part of it. And he will always, I think, maybe not necessarily through any fault of his own, but he'll forever be associated with that.
Derek Rourke's brother's favourite player was Bobby Murdoch. Yeah, and Uncle Nobby's Steamboat. James, away to get the gel on. He must be putting a lot of gel. There must be a bit of hairspray, a hairdryer, and all that kind of stuff. Maybe even some straighteners to work it out, because he'd been missing for a wee while today. Anybody seen James? Raguinho, the football we played under Tommy Burns was phenomenal. You are commenting on Twitch just to prove that we are streaming on Twitch, ladies and gentlemen. And Mikey Boy, welcome back to the show. Tommy Burns encapsulates everything beautiful about this club. He was a fan, legend, and a wonderful human. Absolutely loved him, and his loss still hurts. Here's the thing, guys, right? We talk about, I've said this many, many times, I don't have an English football team. I support Celtic, and that's it. Right, and I always go back to the old shooting match fact file spotlight on interviews. What's your favourite second team? And guys like Tommy Burns and Peter Grant would say Celtic reserves. It's Celtic or nothing, right? And then people go, support your local team, by geographical default because you live in a certain area at a certain time. I have no emotional attachment to anybody at Celtic. How could I possibly have such an emotional feeling about a man I've never met, Tommy Burns? Never met him. I didn't know him. But that comment there, I think, is spot on. You have that emotional attachment to these people. Peter Lamont, or Lamont. Walsh is getting the cup final, beaten on VAR. I don't know if that's confirmed. I've not seen that yet, Peter, but thanks for sharing it. And Henky Hoops, is Chris smiling because of the Gosling thing? Are people saying you look like Ryan Gosling now, Chris? That's the best I've seen. I take that.
If I can give my wife's email address to Henky Hoops, if you could send that to her, that would be brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's better than Jamie Oliver, eh?
I genuinely haven't seen that comment, but that's the best. Can we bookmark that comment? Can we keep that up? I'm going to take a screenshot of that and just keep that up.
I'm leaving it there.
That's my favourite. Henky Hoops, Christmas cards, Acsom merch, whatever you want, mate, you can have that.
Oh, absolutely. Which reminds me, there's a couple of bits on their way. I've been hearing Neil Lennon could be going to Rapid Bucharest in Romania. That's an interesting destination for him, Patrick.
So not Easter Road then, Paul John, no?
Not Easter Road, and thankfully not over in Israel as well, because he was pitching himself for a job over there. Yes, Romania looks to be his next destination. Patrick, what do you make of that?
Yeah, interesting. I thought that was an amalgamation of two other more famous teams, Rapid Bucharest, Rapid Vienna, and Steaua Bucharest. But no, I mean, good on him. He's obviously wanting to test himself as a manager again. Had a bit of an odd spell in Cyprus, but I think he came out afterwards and said, this is basically, he knew that's how it was going to go. He was probably only going to get about 12 months and then get the sack, because they're quite, I mean, it's like a league full of Watfords over in Cyprus. They just sack managers willy-nilly. But no, good on him. He's obviously, Romania's a beautiful country. I've never been, but it looks like quite a nice country. Bucharest, lovely city. So hopefully he has a bit of success there. Yeah, I mean, I don't know a lot about Romanian football apart from Cluj, and obviously not a big fan of them. And obviously I doubt Neil Lennon is either. But he'll want to take revenge on them, I assume. But no, good luck to him. I mean, I thought he was always one of these guys who he sort of get into management to become the Celtic manager, not because he wanted to be a manager, but he's been Celtic manager twice. I'd like to think, no offence to him, but I'd like to think he's not going to be Celtic manager for a third time. So it came as a bit of a surprise to me that he's still in management. But if it's what he wants to do, he's sort of a pundit when he's not a manager now. He's sort of doing it every couple of years. So yeah, good luck to him. Nice part of the world.
Good luck to him indeed. Now, we know that there was a wee meltdown by Ange. I'm sure he'd much rather be going to Rugby Park tonight. But listen, mate, you've had your chance. We've got Brendan Rodgers back in the hot seat tonight. One final question for you, because obviously we're going to be back half an hour before kick-off tonight. Come and join us. But Brendan Rodgers spoke about the awkwardness for the first time, the awkwardness of the first 6 months in post. I found that quite interesting the other day that you brought that up.
I think managers reflect on a lot more than what they give away during the season. And I think sometimes from our perspective as supporters, we sometimes don't recognise it as a human being there, and we've all got stresses in our life and stresses in our work in different circumstances. And look, he must have known before taking on this role. I know people talk about being a bit arrogant, a bit brand Brendan and all that kind of stuff, but there's no way that man didn't dwell over the decision to come back and recognise that he was going to come in and immediately face a bit of resistance from the supporters. If you're coming in fresh as a manager without having that hanging over you and not necessarily knowing the expectations of the fans in the club, I think you come in with a lot less pressure. A lot of people say, well, he's coming in somewhere where he's familiar, knows the staff, knows the league, etc. But he was coming in with a lot of people against him and our support, and that's a tough thing to try and turn round. Yeah. Right before the ball's even been kicked. And then obviously he's trying to find his way around the club structure, the recruitment structure. It looks like he's actually potentially influencing some positive decisions and progress on that front. So look, if things go our way tonight, and I'm full of confidence that they will, I think Brendan deserves all the credit in the world. I think the players who've played their part deserve all the credit in the world, and I think he deserves the right to go and try and take the club forward next season. I'm very much behind him at this point. I know for some people that will never be the case, and I respect that and I understand it. But for me, the man has earned the right to be at this club. He's taken us to the verge of not only a league title, but potentially a double. And for me, at the moment, he's the man to take the club forward. And I wish him all the best of luck in doing it, and I'll be right there behind him.
Me too. Where's your Brendometer? Patrick, we know that Kevin Graham is a hard man to please. He was saying that it was at 20% the other week, I think. Mine's is right up there. It's at the top of the dial. Where's yours?
Oh, I'd have to put mine at 90 or 95, I think. I suppose when someone walks out like that, you can never fully trust him again. But, I think he's a fantastic manager. He's obviously came back because he wants to be here. I don't think he'll have his head turned again. I think he will stay for the full 3 years. If we back him with great players in the summer, I'm sure we'll have a fantastic season next season, and hopefully we can complete the double, do the job tonight, complete the double, and 90-95%, I'm right behind him.
Good to hear. We will be back half an hour before kick-off tonight. Yes, if you've got a ticket, well done. Enjoy the occasion. I think that the more Celtic fans, the merrier. It would be phenomenal if everybody could get a ticket for a game like that, but we know what the situation is, unfortunately. And we will be back not only after the game, but tomorrow, so join us then. As I said earlier on, we're in Dunoon with a couple of the Centenary boys, Peter Grant and Joe Miller. There's a few tickets, about a dozen tickets are available for that gig, and the ticket link is underneath this video. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. Give us a big thumbs up. Enjoy the game tonight, and I'll see you half an hour before kick-off. All this left for me to say, Patrick McGill, Chris McElwain, thank you for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.